Hello. This is What If Luffy was trained by Rayleigh early. Sadly, this is the last part of the series. If you have any other ideas, please comment them down below. Next video is What If Luffy was raised by Whitebeard. It's going to be way longer, so I'm going to cover more than one fanfic while it's going on. The videos will also be much longer for that. The movie is coming soon, so please enjoy the video. Django sighed. He did not enjoy killing kids, but his life was at stake here. He waved his hands forward, ordering his men to charge, and they obeyed. Thoughtlessly to their own peril. Zoro raised his swords and got into his stance. When the crowd was upon him, he shouted Tatsumaki. Zoro became a spinning twister of pain and death as the pirates were flung back down the slope. Most too injured to continue, some would never recover. Django looked at his injured men in horror. If only one of these guys could do all of this, then what about the others? What am I going to do if Kuro gets here first? Were the thoughts racing through the backwards man's mind. Django called his remaining soldiers to him. Men. When I say Django, you will all be 10 times stronger and immune to pain. 1, 2, Django. Django shouted. The pirates' muscles swelled and their eyes reddened. They all shouted and charged with renewed vigor. Hey Zoro, I'll take care of these guys. Luffy ordered. Zoro nodded and stepped aside. Luffy started punching his fists out towards the incoming pirates. Left, then right and so on, till he called out, Gomu Gomu no Gatling. And his fists suddenly seemed to disappear as they moved too quickly for those around to track them. The pirates, on the other hand, could feel their bones breaking and their organs being ruptured as they were hit with the concussive force of a sea train. Luffy then walked back to his previous position. Django was in full-blown panic mode. His remaining men were beaten. All he had left was himself and them. I guess I have no choice now, he thought. Nyaban brothers. I need you out here now. Django called, and 2 odd men jumped out of the boat's lodging area. One was rather tall and skinny, sporting bright green hair and effeminate features. The other was large and obese, wearing no shirt, and had cat fangs and ears. The both sported dangerous-looking metal claws on their fingers. Yes, Django-san. What is it you need? They asked, but then realized most of the crew was dead or unconscious. I need you to kill these bastards for attacking the crew. Watch out for the kid with the straw hat. He seems to be the most dangerous one. Django orders. Aye, Django-san, we will take care of it. They shouted in unison. The cat brothers recklessly charged at Zoro. Zoro prepared to meet them in combat, but at the last second they switched tactics and split apart, going around Zoro to attack Nami. Figuring that if they could take out a weaker one first, it might make the stronger ones angry and careless. That did not work out so well. They were about to slash Nami with their claws when they heard a voice to their side shouting, Gomu Gomu no Bazooka. The brothers were hit and they were thrown into the side of the cliff face. Nami let out a breath she did not know she was holding. Thank you, Luffy. Nami said, honestly thankful for his interference. Luffy nodded. Nami, you and Usopp go to Zoro. Zoro, cover these two. Alright. The 3 nodded. Luffy then turned and gazed into the tree line. Come on out, butler, I know you are watching there. There's no point in hiding when you can't hide from me. Luffy called Kuro out. Kuro stepped out from the tree line and had a look of rage on his face. He was carrying a large duffel bag. On his shoulder. He glared at Luffy, then at Django. You ruined my plans, Django. What did I tell you would happen if you ruined my plans? Did you think I was joking? I know you know me better than that. Kuro said as he was pulling clawed gloves out of the bag and putting them on. I guess I have no choice but to kill everyone here and take the Oho-sama's money. No will. You will suffer, Django. I will see to it personally. Hold on a second there, butler. That can only happen if you get past me first. Luffy said. Kuro turned to Luffy. You say that like it won't be a simple task to kill you all. Kuro said in what he thought was an intimidating way. Luffy just burst out in laughter. Stop this, Clahatter. Kaya shouted. They all turned and seen Kaya holding a pistol in her shaking hands. I found Mary, he told me everything. If you want my money, you can have my money. Just leave me, Usopp, and the village be. There is no need for this senseless violence. Kaya shouted as she walked onto the battlefield. Kuro turned to her. Usopp was in a panic seeing his friend in the area. Mary lived. Guess I've grown soft in these peaceful years. Kuro said. Kaya. Get out of here. He'll kill you. Usopp begged her to leave. Kaya turned to Usopp with tears in her eyes and ran to him. Wrapping her arms around him in a tight hug. I'm so sorry for not believing you before, Usopp-san. I'm so ashamed of myself. She cried out, begging forgiveness from her best friend. Look at the kiddies. Playing makeup. I wasn't interested in just your money, Oho-sama. I wanted your easy lifestyle as well. So just taking your money will do me no good, you see. I need you to be dead and the villagers thinking you left it all to me. Kuro said, angering Usopp. Usopp pointed his slingshot at Kuro. How many closer to her and I'll kill you myself, Kuro. shouted Usopp, showing a large degree of courage. Luffy smiled. Dango, get Oho-sama to write the will, and I might consider forgiving you, this once. Kuro stated. Usopp, get her out of here. Zoro covered their escape. Nami robbed them blind. Luffy called out. They all nodded. Nami was worried about Django, but that quickly resolved itself when Kuro ordered him to finish the mission with Kaya. Kuro tried to stop Zoro from helping Kaya when Luffy stepped in front of him and shook his head. You aren't leaving here, butler. I can't have you hurting Usopp or his friends now, can I? Luffy asked in an amused tone. Why are you here anyways? What's in it for you that you would throw your life away for these people? Kuro asked. You think I'm throwing my life away, butler? I'm not in any danger here at all. This won't even be a warm-up for me. Luffy said. Kuro sighed. Boy, you don't even know who I am. Do you? You really think I'm just a butler? I was a feared and notorious pirate till about 3 years ago. I've personally killed more marines than I care to count. I've taken down entire ships full of marines. Kuro rambled. Luffy was feeling bored and almost fell asleep. You're boring me, fighter, give up. Luffy commanded. Kuro growled. Disrespectful brat, I will teach you. Kuro ran at Luffy and brought his clawed hand down to cut Luffy, but Luffy simply grabbed the offending appendage with one hand and used a free hand to punch Kuro in the gut. He let Kuro go and Kuro jumped back, pondering how to go about this fight. He was not used to fighting people that could keep up with him. You seem strong, stronger than most I fight here in East Blue. Kuro said, taking Luffy more seriously. Luffy chuckled. Yeah, I suppose I am. But that might be because I was raised in the New World. You have to be tough to survive their shishishi. I don't even need to try with someone like you. Luffy laughed, mocking Kuro. Raised in the New World. This kid's gonna be tough. I have to go all out with him or he'll kill me. Kuro thought. Kuro started rocking back and forth with his eyes closed and his clawed hands limp at his side. If I use stealth foot, there will be no way in hell he can beat me. I'm the fastest man alive when I use that technique. Thought the poor deluded fool. There were suddenly panicked shouts from the remaining Black Cat pirates. No, Captain. Don't do it. We're still in range. These were the general theme of the shouts. Kuro ignored them. Near the start of Kuro's monologue, Dango was trying to figure out how to get past Zoro to finish his task with the girl when thought of something. He smiled. This man fell for my sleep hypnosis yesterday. I should be able to get him again. He pulled out his chakram and spoke. When I say 1, 2, he heard Zoro cutting him off. Santoryu. Onigiri. Django felt nothing but pain as his chest area was sliced badly. You think I'll let you put me to sleep again, weirdo? Not going to happen. Zoro said to the unconscious hypnotist. Zoro then turned to check out his captain's fight. There were no more enemies after the girl, so it should be fine. He told himself. Luffy watched as Kuro attacked his own men one after another, with growing rage. But it all changed when Kuro's claws chose Zoro as their next target. He knew Zoro was not up to this man's speed yet, so he would not be able to evade. Luffy calculated Kuro's trajectory and swung his foot in an incredibly fast kick, calling out Renkyaku. The blade of wind shot right into Kuro's path, forcing him to jump back. Zoro seen Kuro appear out of thin air when the blade flew in front him. Thanks, Captain. I couldn't even see that guy. Zoro shouted, getting back from his captain's fight. No problem, Zoro. Luffy said, then turned a heated glare to Kuro. It was at this time that Nami got out of the ship empty-handed. She approached Zoro and he turned to her. What happened? They had no treasure. She nodded. They were broke. They must have needed this job just to survive. Sucks to be them. Zoro nodded and pointed at Luffy. He's pissed. Watch this. Zoro said with a smirk. Nami turned to watch the fight. Okay, the kid gloves are off, old man. You think you are fast? I'll show you speed. Gear second, Luffy shouted as he lowered himself into the horse stance with his left hand on his knee and the right touching the ground. Suddenly Luffy's legs seemed to distort and bulge out. His body instantly became an angry reddish pink and steaming, as though it was cooking itself alive. Kuro prepared himself to counter this new move but was unprepared for what happened next. Luffy vanished from his sight. Instantly Luffy appears in front of Kuro and slapped him across the battlefield. Kuro stood back up, albeit more wobbly than he would have liked. He began looking for his opponent, only to feel a painfully strong punch hit him in the gut, sending him flying yet again across the battlefield. Kuro realized he was in a fight he couldn't win. This person was so fast that even he could not see him. So he decided to at least try to escape him. Getting to his feet as quickly as his battered body would allow, he entered stealth foot again and tried to aim his steps towards town, where he would at least be able to take a hostage or two. But it was not to be. Soon as he started to flee, Luffy appeared in front of him, his arm held forward as if he was aiming it at something. Then Luffy said, "Gomu Gomu no jet pistol." And Kuro knew no more as he flew back towards his boat, smashing into the hull. Luffy relaxed and his skin returned to a normal tone. Nami had never before seen such a one-sided fight in her life. No, fight is not a correct term for what she had just seen. Slaughter might be more apt, even if Kuro lives, his pirating days are over. She would have to think about this. Let's go see Usopp and his little girlfriend, they are a few hundred feet that way, Luffy said pointing down the road. Zoro and Nami nodded, Nami no longer doubting Luffy's words as much. Usopp and Kaya were running as fast as Kaya could. Let's hide in these woods, Kaya, we can't get too far away at this pace. Usopp whispered. If there was a few things Usopp was good at, hiding was one of them. I'm sorry Usopp-san, I just can't run very fast. Kaya apologized. Usopp nodded in understanding. No, it's fine, we'll just have to make do as best we can. Usopp said as they traversed through the woods. They found a hollowed-out tree and he told Kaya to get into the hole. She did not want to because they both couldn't hide then, but he pushed her in and covered it up with a log. Usopp heard someone coming in their direction. He tried to hide behind a tree, holding his breath. Hey Usopp, Kaya. You guys can come out now. We beat Kuro and his pirates. Luffy called out. Usopp ran out from behind the tree with a large smile on his face. You guys won, that's so great. He ran to Kaya's hiding spot and helped her out. We're safe, Kaya. My friends won. He told her. She nodded happily. I invite you all back to my home to rest and recover, it's the least I can do for all you have done for us. Kaya told them. They all followed Kaya back to the mansion where they found a wounded but alive Mary. The next day Kaya and a bandaged up Mary were leading the Straw Hats down to the same beach they had their battle. All Kaya had told them was that there was a surprise waiting for them. They had been talking about a boat and their need for one at the dinner party the previous night, so she decided that the boat Mary had been working on would be a good gift. In a small house somewhere just outside the village of Syrup, Usopp was loading all of his valuable items into a bag, the only problem. The bag was far too small for all the things Usopp valued. It was now so overstuffed that it looked like it wouldn't fit through the door. As they crested the hill leading to He Beach they were in awe at the caravel ship waiting for them there. Luffy ran the rest of the way and jumped up onto the boat checking it out. Zoro was happy to finally have a boat he could train on. Nami was happy she would have more room to move around now. The ship was brown with white railing, one mast with brown sails. The most notable feature was a lamb's figurehead with a forward-facing cannon underneath it. This is a caravel ship, it is a bit old-fashioned, but I think it will serve your purposes for now. Its name is the Going Merry, Mary said, no one had to guess where he got the name from. He began to instruct Luffy about how to control and steer the ship, but Nami jumped between them. Don't tell him, he'll forget in 5 minutes. Tell me I'm the navigator. So Mary told her how to guide the Going Merry. They all heard a weird yelling sound coming closer, they soon understood that the voice was calling for help. Help me. Someone stop me. They heard Usopp shouting, they turned and seen a large bowl rolling down the hill. Luffy jumped in front of it and shouted Gomu Gomu no fussin'. When Usopp hit Luffy he bounced back and hit the edge of the cliff. Ouch, that hurt Luffy-san. Did you have to stop me like that? Usopp asked, groaning in pain. What was that? How did you turn into a balloon? Kaya asked. It was a legitimate question after all. Luffy pulled his cheeks far too far for human skin and replied. I ate the Gomu Gomu no Mi, a devil fruit. I'm a rubberman. Luffy answered. Kaya just nodded, still confused. Usopp was seen loading his oversized bag into a small dinghy that somehow no one had noticed. Well, guys. Thanks for everything you did for me and my village. I guess I'll be seeing you out there on the ocean someday. Usopp said. The Straw Hats looked at him funny for a second. Head up here Usopp. We fought together, you're our nakama. Luffy said. Zoro and Nami nodded with kind smiles on their faces. Usopp could hardly believe it. Captain Usopp. He yelled as he ran to the ship. Luffy got a tick mark. I'm the captain. You can be second in command when Zoro and Nami are asleep. Luffy shouted. Usopp looked down for a split second but laughed it off. The Going Merry sails unfurled and they started pulling away from the shore. A day later on the Going Merry. Luffy had just made a Jolly Roger for the Going Merry to advertise their place in the world of piracy. But Luffy's drawing and painting skill was atrocious at best. The flag ended up looking like a modern art masterpiece. Zoro thought it might actually scare people away like that. Usopp approached Luffy. I'll take over, you need someone with artistic skills to do this. He shouted as he pulled out a flag from the pile of blank black flags. He drew a perfectly good-looking skull and crossbones. Except that it has a long nose and a slingshot behind it. Luffy bopped him on the head. We ain't the Usopp pirates. Get it right. Usopp rubbed his head and redrew it, holding it up for all of them to see. The flag that would one day shake the world and bring oppressors to their knees. The skull and crossbones with a straw hat. The crew cheered. Usopp, can you do one across the mainsail? Luffy asked and Usopp nodded and got to work. An hour or so later the work was done and the crew admired Usopp's artistic skills. A while later they were pretty bored sailing, so Luffy called Zoro over to him on the main area of the boat. Luffy looked thoughtful for a second. Then he realized thinking too hard only gives him headaches. "Zoro, I want to teach you something." Zoro nodded. If this man was taught by the likes of Rayleigh, I would be a complete fool to deny his advice. Zoro thought. Nami looked skeptical. "What are you going to teach him? I haven't seen you use that sword yet. I thought you carried it for decoration." Luffy got an annoyed tick on his head. "The sword was a gift to me from Shanks. I don't use it on nobodies," Luffy answered. Zoro chuckled at that. "Then why did you use it on Morgan?" Luffy laughed. "Oh that. I wanted to make him symmetrical. He was missing a right hand, so I thought making him lose his left leg would balance him." Zoro busted out in a hearty laugh. "I'm not a swordsman like Zoro here, but there's some cool stuff I've been taught that he could use in his fights. I'll show you all right now." Luffy turned his back to Zoro and closed his eyes tightly. "Zoro, attack me with your swords," Luffy ordered. Nami and Usopp panicked. "Whoa, hold on now, there's no need to go that far. We believe you," Usopp yelled. He did not want to lose his new captain that fast. Nami just did not want to see someone die so foolishly. "It's fine, don't worry about it. You'll see. Go ahead Zoro," Luffy said, trying to reassure them. Zoro swiped his Wado Ichimonji at Luffy's neck. Luffy ducked the attack, shocking the two non-combatants. "Do more attacks, and faster Zoro," Luffy said. Zoro nodded and increased the pace and viciousness of his attacks. After a few moments though, Zoro had seen the point of the demonstration and did not need to continue. Nami and Usopp were both floored by it. Without looking or even being able to see, Luffy dodged at least 100 sword slashes, all at speeds Usopp and Nami could barely track. "How do you do that?" they all asked in one way or another. Luffy laughed. "Haki. It's a mystery power I was taught by my teacher Rayleigh. What I just used was the Haki of observation. It lets you sense lifeforms around you and helps you predict attacks directed at you. There are 3 types, I'll show you another one now." "Zoro, try to cut me, I won't dodge this time," Luffy said. Zoro obeyed. Zoro raised his sword and swung it. Uzoshoku. Koka. Luffy's arm turned obsidian black and shined like the same. He raised his arm into the path of the blade, and to everyone's shock, there was no dismembered arm on the deck, there wasn't even a drop of blood to be seen. The blade stopped cold on Luffy's blackened skin, as though Zoro had hit the hardest steel. That was Haki of armament. It allows you to coat any part or even all of your body in an invisible layer of armor that would stop any and all attacks that are not also Haki enhanced. "How long did it take you to learn all these skills?" Zoro asked. Luffy thought for a second. "Maybe 2.5 years, but I was a kid back then. It might not take as long with you guys. Whoever wants to learn it at least," Luffy answered. "There is one more, but it can't be learned, you have to be born with it, and it's like 1 in a million odds from what old man Rayleigh told me. It's called Haki of the Conqueror. It's the mystery power I use to knock people out without touching them," Luffy said. "Can you show us that one, Luffy?" Nami asked. She was very curious about how he did that trick. Luffy thought about it and decided to try it. What's the worst that could happen? Luffy thought. Luffy lowered his hat over his eyes, and the personality shift was immediately noticed. Then there was a wave of something only Usopp vaguely recognized. But this was on a whole other level. Everyone fell to their knees and began panting, their eyes wide in terror at some perceived threat, sweat pouring down their brows. When it finally let up, they all took deep gulps of air and slowly climbed back to their feet. "Wow, that was just intense. Was that as strong as it can get?" Nami asked as she wiped some sweat off her forehead. Luffy laughed at the silliness of the question. "No, not even close. If I wanted, I could put you all into a coma for weeks," Luffy said with cold, brutal honesty. They were all quite shocked at this statement. Nami more than most. "He can hospitalize people by simply looking at them, that is a terrible power. Good thing he seems like an okay person," Nami thought. Nami considered learning the observation Haki so that she could evade Arlong if necessary later. "How do you learn that observation one? You did it, looks interesting to me," Luffy nodded. "You have to meditate a lot. The old man told me this one was one of the most spiritual of the Hakis, it requires a clear mind to use it." Nami nodded. She now understood why Luffy told Zoro to meditate on Gecko Island. "Can you teach me, Luffy? I would like to learn this stuff as well," Nami asked. Luffy smiled brightly. "Sure. It will be painful though, it's not just meditation. It will involve dodging things you can't see. Are you willing to take some pain to gain the power?" Luffy asked. Nami considered her options. "If I can learn this, I might be able to beat Arlong myself someday. But it will take years, I think," she thought to herself. But she eventually nodded her acceptance of eventual pain for the long-term gain. "Yes, if it is what I need to do to learn. I will try to take it. Thank you Luffy. Nami said, sincerely. Okay. Since Zoro is at ease with meditation, he will learn this quicker. He can probably move on to the dodging part already. So Nami, go to the far end of the ship and relax. You need to close off your mind and concentrate only on sensing the life around you. It will take a while. So don't get impatient. Luffy said. Okay Zoro, I want you to blindfold yourself and take a seat in the usual mediation position. Luffy ordered. Zoro nodded and used his bandana to wrap his eyes and took a seat. Luffy got a broom from a storeroom and approached Zoro. And after a few seconds of trying not to laugh at what was about to happen, he took a lazy swing. Zoro did nothing to indicate he sensed it coming. The handle smacked Zoro in the back of the head. Ow. God damn it. That hurts. Zoro shouted. Luffy couldn't contain it. He finally gets to dish out what he took for all those months. He's gonna enjoy this. No pain no gain Zoro. You gotta sense it coming, anticipate it. You think it hurts from me? Imagine it from old man Rayleigh. Luffy laughed. Zoro nodded. I'm sorry Captain, I won't complain anymore. Luffy smiled. Zoro was a good trainee. Usopp watched, confused why someone would willingly put themselves through such pain. As Zoro continually got hit, he walked over to the cannons and started loading one, wanting to test their aim. He found a large outcropping of rock a few hundred yards off the starboard side, and aiming the cannon he fired. His aim was true and it hit the rocks, causing a minor explosion. Everyone yelled at him except Luffy, who thought the explosion was cool. About 15 minutes later, a tired-looking man jumped aboard the Going Merry to find 3 men and a woman all either meditating, cleaning, or beating the shit out of the male meditating. Confused he was, but he was more mad than anything else. How dare you filthy pirates try to kill me and my partner Yosaku. I'll get vengeance. The man drew his sword and approached Luffy. Zoro jumped up and spoke. Johnny, is that you? Zoro asked. Johnny gasped and turned to Zoro. Zoro and Ikki. You are on a pirate ship. Did they capture you? That man was beating you, it looked painful. Zoro laughed. No, it's just training, and I became a pirate. No bounty yet though. Where is your partner Yosaku? Zoro asked after chuckling at the torture comment. Johnny's attitude changed to panicked worry as he led them to the side of the boat and pulled Yosaku up to the deck. The dying Zoro and Ikki. A few days ago he suddenly fell ill, he grew pale, started losing teeth and then lost consciousness. I have no idea why. Johnny said, crying over his friend. Nami sighed. I had taken him to a small rocky outcropping for him to rest on, but then your ship attacked us. Johnny said. Usopp cringed in realization that he may have killed an innocent man. Are you stupid? Nami asked as she walked up to the rest of them. They all looked at her questioningly. She sighed again. It's scurvy. How can anyone who sails not know about scurvy? This happens when you are out at sea for long periods and do not get enough vitamin C. Usopp, go to the kitchens and get some tangerines. Nami said. Usopp complained. Why does it gotta be me? Usopp was answered with a large bump on the head and his face hitting the hardwood. Just do as I say Usopp. Usopp nodded and ran off like a scolded dog. Moments later Usopp came out with his arms full of the citrus fruit Nami requested, Reed demanded. Nami began cutting them open and squeezing the juice of the tangerine into the sick man's mouth. After a few moments the Yosaku's eyes lit up and he jumped to his feet. Johnny was ecstatic. He had his friend back. They were dancing together when Nami charged in and punched Yosaku in the head, bringing him back down to the decking. It's not that fast. She screamed with shark-like teeth. Take him to the men's quarters, he should rest for a few days getting a lot of vitamin C. They carried Yosaku to his temporary bed and returned to the deck. Nami turned to the rest of the crew. We are going to need a cook if you plan to head to the Grand Line. Otherwise we could all come down with diseases like that. Luffy nodded. Johnny spoke up. If it's a sea cook you need, then you need look no further than the Baratie. It's the most famous sea restaurant in all the blues. All the cooks there know how to fight as well, because of the number of hostile pirates that come through on their way to the Grand Line. Luffy nodded. Off to the Baratie then. Where is it Johnny? Luffy asked, and Johnny pointed in the direction of north-northeast. Yosh. Let's go Nami. On the deck of the Going Merry we find the swordsman and the captain of the crew clashing, the former using 3 swords and the latter using his single sword. Zoro was fighting with intense ferocity and it showed on his face as sweat poured down his brow. Sparks flew across the deck as the other crew members watched with varying shades of disbelief. In all the weeks that Nami has been sailing with these pirates, she was losing her sense of what was possible for a human to do. She subtly glanced at the wanted poster for Arlong that she had kept with her for years. She thought about Luffy's abilities to use Haki and fly, Geppu. She never seen Arlong do anything like that at all, and Luffy claims to have been taught by incredibly powerful men. Santoryu. Onigiri. Zoro launched himself at Luffy with his go-to attack. Luffy casually blocked the 3-sword attack with his one blade. Zoro and Luffy continued their training for several more minutes, while Johnny and Yosaku cheered their hero on, thinking he had a chance at beating the captain. "You can do it. Zoro and Nikki," Yosaku shouted. "Cut his fucking head off, Zoro and Nikki," Johnny shouted. Luffy soared behind Zoro faster than anyone watching could see and took a shot at Zoro's head. Zoro without thinking rolled to the side before realizing that he actually seen the attack coming from behind him before it happened. Zoro got back to his feet, resheathed his swords and turned to his captain. "Captain, I think I just had my first experience in observation Haki. I seen your attack coming from behind me before it even happened. Is that how it is?" Zoro asked. Luffy nodded. "Yeah, it seems you just awoke your observation Haki, now all need is practice." Luffy put his sword away and approached the helm. Zoro went back to his weights. "So Nami, how long till we get to the sea restaurant? I'm getting hungry," Zoro asked, excitedly. Nami shook her head in amusement. "Soon Luffy, we should be able to see it soon." Luffy cheered but suddenly became alert, looking towards the stern of the ship. There was a marine ship approaching the starboard side of the Going Merry. A man of average height and build, with pink hair and something like brass knuckles integrated into his fists introduced himself. "I've never seen that Jolly Roger before. I'm Marine Lieutenant Iron Fist Fullbody." "Who is your captain?" the now identified lieutenant shouted. Luffy faced the man proudly. "I'm the captain of the Straw Hat Pirates. We just created our Jolly Roger." The lieutenant scrutinized the man for a moment before a beautiful woman grasped his arm and gestured towards the restaurant. Fullbody nodded. "Well, I don't really care who you are or how long you've been pirates. I have a date to get to." Turning to his men he said, "These guys are an eyesore, sink 'em," while holding a thumbs down. His men nodded and started loading the cannons as he boarded a small landing vessel. "Usopp, give me a few of your lead shots," Luffy ordered while holding his hands out towards his sniper. Usopp complied curiously. "I'm gonna show you something you could do someday." "Shishishi," Luffy said while laughing. As the men fired the cannons at the Going Merry, Luffy charged the lead shots with some armament Haki and threw them at the cannonballs, causing them to explode midair. Usopp was shocked along with everyone else there. "I would not load that cannon again, Marines, unless you want sink you," Luffy said, giving off a small wave of Conqueror's Haki. The Marines nodded frantically. The crew of the Straw Hat Pirates entered the Baratie and took their seats at a large table. They were having a good time waiting to be served when the Marine, Fullbody, rudely approached their table. "What do you filthy pirates think you are doing here? I ordered your ship sunk," Fullbody asked. "Just because you ordered our ship sunk doesn't mean we are gonna let you sink it. We like the Going Merry floating, thank you very much," Luffy said while laughing at Fullbody. Fullbody did not take too kindly to the mocking, raising his hand to crush the tiny pirate when a black boot hit him in the face, sending him flying across the dining hall. "There will be no attacking customers," the man said, rather hypocritically I might add. He had blonde hair covering his left eye, he wore a clean black suit with a blue undershirt. He had a cigarette in his mouth. Turning to the customers he bowed. "My name is Sanji, assistant head chef. How may I help you?" he asked. Luffy and Zoro demanded meat and beer. Usopp asked for fish. When Sanji got to Nami, his visible eye became a heart and he fell to one knee. "May I take your order, mademoiselle?" the cook said with a heart in his visible eye. Nami smirked. "I would like some sweet desserts, but I'm not sure if I have enough. How about you let me have mine for free?" she asked, fluttering her eyes at the Euro cook. "Of course, my fair lady. These bastards can pay for your meal." Sanji pointed at the other Straw Hat Pirates. "That's unfair. Sexual discrimination. I'll sue you," Usopp yelled. Sanji looked unconcerned. "Good luck with dealing with the world government, shitty pirate," Sanji said as he took their orders. When Sanji left, Fullbody returned, sporting a rather painful-looking black eye. "I'll take you all to the nearest marine base, you damned pirates." As he brought his fist down towards the seated Straw Hat captain's head, Luffy raised his hand and caught the approaching fist. Giving it a rather gentle squeeze, he brought the marine down to his knees, crying in pain. "Let me go. You're breaking my hand," he begged. Luffy looked unconcerned. Putting a little more pressure, he felt a few of the man's fingers break. "Am I really supposed to care about breaking a marine's hand?" Luffy asked. He lost his patience with this bastard trying to ruin his meal time. Finally, Luffy let the man go. "Why don't you get out of here, little marine? I don't think you are ready to mess with us," Luffy added. Fullbody nodded, cradling his broken hand, and ran away, nearly leaving his soon-to-be ex-girlfriend behind. Luffy and Zoro had a good laugh at the man. As the Straw Hats waited for their food, a sickly-looking man wearing a grey track outfit including beanie cap entered the Baratie, found a table and demanded to be fed. When a large chef that was heavily built approached him. "Hello, customer. My name is Patty, chef at the Baratie Sea restaurant. Do you have any money to pay for your food?" the now named Patty asked him. The man pointed a pistol at his head. "Do you take lead?" the man asked. Paddy smiled wickedly before raising both arms and smashing the man, table and all, then proceeded to throw the man out of the restaurant. Near the kitchen area, the head chef of the restaurant, Red Leg Zeff, shook his head in disappointment at his chef's actions. Sanji left the restaurant through a side door with a plate full food. Luffy seen this and decided to follow him. Sanji placed the food in front of the prone pirate and waited for him to start eating. But the man wanted no part of Sanji's charity. "I won't be looked down on. I refuse your pity," the man said, nearly breaking down in tears. Sanji sighed. "Don't be so tough, just eat already. To me any hungry person is a customer," Sanji said. "I have no money to pay for it," the man said, staring at the food hungrily. Sanji looked up at the sky. "The vast ocean can be very cruel. It's awful not to have any food or water. I understand starving people more than just about anyone. I don't care if you want to die with dignity. But if you eat, you could at least look forward to another tomorrow, right?" Sanji said, giving the man a friendly smile. Apparently that was all it took to break the man's pride, and he began digging into his meal, thanking Sanji profusely between bites. Luffy had seen enough, he knew this man would be his cook. Luffy walked over to Sanji. "Hey Sanji-san. Why don't you join my crew and sail the oceans with us?" Luffy asked while flashing Sanji the infamous D grin. Sanji shook his head. "I'll have to pass. I have debts to pay to the owner of this restaurant and I can't pay them if I'm out at sea." Luffy grinned. "I refuse," Luffy shouted. "You refuse? You refuse what?" Sanji asked. "I refuse your refusal," Luffy said, as if it was a perfectly normal response. "It doesn't work like that," Sanji shouted, with sharp teeth and exposed eye on fire. The unnamed pirate stood up between the two men to stop the arguing. "Excuse me, you said you are a pirate, yes?" Luffy nodded, wondering what this guy was getting at. "My name's Jin, from the Krieg Armada. What's your goal?" the now named Jin asked. Luffy smiled wide. "Pirate King. The One Piece is my goal," Luffy stated proudly. Jin shook his head. "You should quit, don't waste your life going to the Grand Line, there is plenty to see here in East Blue. My captain had over 50 ships and we were all but wiped out in a day," Jin said, hoping to stop the young man from marching to his own death. "What the hell happened to you guys? Losing 50 ships in a day is pretty stupid even by my standard shishishi." Luffy laughed. Jin growled in anger. "We ran into a monster of the seas. He swung a black blade as large as he cleaved our ships in half with a single swing of that demon blade. There is no way that he was a mortal man," Jin shouted. Not liking having his crew's strength put in question. Luffy broke out in a belly-hurting laugh. "You shishishi ran into Shishi Dracula Mihawk. On your first day in the Grand Line, talk about a horrible start," Luffy said while trying to stop laughing. Jin looked shocked. "Dracula Mihawk? Who is that?" "You know who attacked us?" Jin asked. Luffy nodded in the affirmative. "Dracula Mihawk is a Shichibukai, he's the strongest swordsman in the world too. You guys probably interrupted his nap." Shishishi. Jin looked appalled. They had their dreams shattered because they interrupted a man's nap. "Hey. Eggplant, get your ass back to work," Zeff shouted from the kitchens. Jin thanked Sanji for the food and took off in a stolen dingy. The next day we find that Zoro was training on the ship, Usopp was working on his inventions in his room, Nami was stalking Luffy. Yes, she was trying to get Luffy alone to make a deal with him. She found him watching the chefs cooking food in the kitchens. "Luffy, can I talk to you in private please?" Luffy turned to Nami and nodded, following her to an unoccupied room. Luffy waited for Nami to tell him what she needed. Nami was fidgeting as she pulled out Arlong's wanted poster. Taking a deep breath, she held the poster out for Luffy to take. I want to hire you to kill this man for me. Can you do it?" she asks, gaining an urgent and desperate tone to her voice. Luffy takes the poster and reads it. "Arlong, eh? This is what's been bothering you all this time?" Luffy asked. Nami nodded, sniffing slightly. "I'll pay you 100 million beery." She closed her eyes, waiting for the denial. No sane man would fight a fishman after all, they are the real monsters in this world. What she did not expect, however, was for a pair of strong arms to wrap around her and pull her into a strong but gentle hug. "Nami. You don't have to pay me anything. We are Nakama, if this man is your enemy, then he is my enemy. No, he is the Straw Hat Pirate's enemy," Luffy said, gradually getting louder until he was shouting. Nami could no longer contain her emotions and burst out into tears, crying into Luffy's shoulder. Luffy simply rubbed her back, letting her shed the years of pent-up grief and frustration. Not long after Nami and Luffy entered the room, there was a loud scream from one of the patrons of the restaurant. "It's the Don Creek Pirates. Look, that's their Jolly Roger. The Hergless means your time has run out," he shouted. Many of the dinners started to evacuate the restaurant. Most not even bothering to finish their food or pay. Zoro glanced out the window and scoffed. The ship was a mess, nearly looked like a ghost ship. The sails were in tatters, the hull had large scars all over it. Broken rails all along the deck. It was a wonder if was still floating. Usopp was in near panic mode, it was so bad that Zoro knocked him face first into the floor just to get him to shut up. Several minutes of Usopp complaining later Jin entered with a rather large man leaning on his shoulder for support. They got to the center of fell to their knees in submission. "Please, we are starving, we haven't eaten in days. We have money, we can pay for food," they begged. The chefs, realizing they are relatively safe, started laughing at the downed pirates. "Ha. Like hell we'll give you food. You'll betray us like you always do, Don Krieg," Patty shouted while still keeping a safe distance between him and the notorious pirates. Luffy, who returned with Nami moments earlier, watched the scene unfold. He did notice Sanji entering the kitchens though. Minutes of mocking and name-calling later, Sanji came out of the kitchen with 2 steaming plates of food and placed them in front of the starved pirates. "Eat up," he said. "Sanji, what do you think you're doing? He's a liar," Patty shouted. "Sanji, duck," Luffy shouted, and for some reason Sanji obeyed. An arm sailed through the air that Sanji's neck had recently occupied. Sanji jumped away, shocked at the sneak attack. He turned to Luffy. "Thank you, Straw Hat," Sanji said. Luffy nodded. "No problem, Sanji, I can't let my chef get hurt now, can I?" Luffy said. "I never agreed to that," Sanji shouted. "Why did you interfere, Straw Hat brat?" Krieg shouted. Luffy scoffed at the man. "I don't have to answer a weakling like you," Luffy said, causing everyone except Zoro to gasp in shock. Krieg growled in rage. "I'll get back to you soon enough, punk. Just you wait." He turned to the chefs. "You know, I like this ship. Give me food for 100 men and this ship and I will spare your lives. Refuse and I'll kill you all and take it anyways," Krieg shouted, showing his bloodlust. Just as Zeff was going to the kitchens, Patty appeared with a bazooka he had hidden away for just such occasions. "Hey Krieg, you like that meal, how about some dessert?" he shouted as he fired the missile at Krieg. It hit right on the money and there was a large explosion that knocked several customers and weaker chefs on their asses. The chefs were dancing around thinking that Patty had finished the pirates. When the smoke cleared, Krieg was standing there unscathed with most of his shirt and coat destroyed. He had armor covering his chest and arms that looked strong enough to stop most weapon damage. He also had diamond-plated gloves. Nami's eyes were now beery signs. "Captain, I want those gloves." Nami squealed in joy at the thought of those gems. Luffy smirked. Krieg looked over at the pirate that saved Sanji from his wrath. "What makes you think you can have these gloves? It's not like you can take them from me, little girl," Krieg said, causing Nami to bristle in anger. Luffy put his hand on her shoulder, instantly calming her rage. "Don't worry, Nami, this dog's all bark and no bite. If you want those gloves then it's my job to get them for you," Luffy said, showing no concern about the Armada captain's growing rage at being ignored. Moments later, Zeff came out of the kitchen with a ridiculously large bag over his shoulder. He dropped the bag in front of Krieg. "This is food for 100 men, take it and beggin from here," Zeff said. He was met with shouts of "No Zeff-san," or "No head chef Zeff." This caused the Armada captain to take a closer look at the ragged old cook. You're red-legged Zeff, aren't you?" Krieg asked. Zeff nodded. "Yeah, what you want?" "An autograph?" Zeff asked, chuckling at his own joke. Krieg was in no mood for jokes and backhanded Zeff to the shock of all the other chefs. "No, you old fool. You survived on the Grand Line for at least a year, you must have kept a logbook. I want that logbook and this restaurant. It'll be easy to sneak up on unsuspecting ships if I use this ship," Krieg said. Zeff shook his head in the negative. "I will not be giving you any logs from my time as captain of the Cook Pirates, they are priceless mementos of my crew," Zeff said, not concerned at all with the threats of a Grand Line dropout. Krieg grabbed Zeff by the throat and picked him up. "I don't give a damn about your mementos, I want your logbook. I had the men, the power and the ships. All I lacked was planning and knowledge. With your logbook I can become Pirate King." Suddenly a rubber fist smashed into Krieg's face, sending him sprawling across the dining hall. "No one's gonna be Pirate King except me. So don't you go claiming the title, old man," Luffy shouted. Krieg got up, wiping a small amount of blood away from his mouth. Glaring at the kid. "Damn, this kid hits like a sea train. I'll deal with you momentarily, Straw Hat. Soon as my men have been fed," Krieg angrily shouted. Luffy chucked. "Yeah, because you're scared to fight me like a man here and now go ahead, run to your men, little coward," Luffy said, with an cocky smirk on his face. Nami and Usopp looked a little worried, Zoro looked bored. "Hey old man," Luffy gestured to Zeff. Zeff grunted in annoyance at the moniker. "What you want, brat? Can't you see I got stuff on my mind here?" Zeff nearly shouted. "I got a deal for you, how about me and my crew take care of Krieg and his crew and you stock our ship with food and we take that cook off your hands," Luffy asked while pointing at Sanji. Sanji was about to reply with an angry retort when Zeff spoke for him. "Sure, you got a deal, kid." Sanji sputtered in disbelief. "What the hell, you old fool. You can't just trade me off like cheap produce." Sanji shouted. "Little eggplant, it's time for you to go. You've cooped yourself up in this place long enough. You're a young man, it's time for you to sow your oats, as they say," Zeff said as he stared at his adopted son. Sanji felt tears welling up at the old man's words, officially giving him permission to seek his dream. The All Blue. "Captain, am I gonna get to fight sometime soon?" Zoro asked. Luffy perked up, feeling an incredibly powerful presence enter his observation range. "Someone extremely powerful is here. Be ready for a fight, Zoro. I'm not even sure if I can take this new guy, his Haki presence is huge," Luffy said, showing some signs of excitement. Suddenly they all heard a large explosion, and the Baratie shook as the waves smashed against its hull. The crew all ran to the front of the restaurant to look outside. What they saw shocked most of them. The Krieg ship was sliced clean in half. Approaching the wreckage was a small eerie boat the size and general shape of a coffin, with green glowing candles and a tall man seated in the center. The man wore a long red and black trench coat and a wide-brimmed black hat decorated with a large plume, no shirt showing off an impressive physique and plain purple pants. The ensemble is topped off by what looked to be a rather large cross on his back. But Luffy and Zoro knew better, this was a sword. The most powerful sword in the world. Yoru. One of the Krieg pirates foolishly fired on the man. Mihawk simply drew Yoru and deflected the projectiles with effortless ease. "What? How did I miss?" the fool asked. "You didn't miss, he simply deflected your bullets with his blade. Isn't that right, Mihawk?" Zoro asked as he parted the fodder pirates so that he could get closer to Mihawk. Mihawk nodded. "A sword wielded without skill is naught but an iron bar," Mihawk answered. Zoro agreed. "I've been sailing the seas to face you. How about we duel for the title of strongest?" Zoro demanded. Mihawk sighed as he jumped from his boat to the wreckage of Krieg's ship. "If you were truly a great swordsman, you would be able to tell that the gap between us is too great at the moment. I sense that you have just now started to realize the greater world," Mihawk said, making Zoro raise an eyebrow. Zoro drew his blades, placing Wado Ichimonji in his mouth, his nameless blades at his side. Mihawk took his necklace off, showing that it was actually a small dagger disguised as a cross pendant. Zoro was disgusted by this apparent disrespect. "What is the meaning of this?" Zoro said. "I'm not a fool that uses his all to hunt rabbits, though you may have a limited amount of fame here, this is still the weakest of all the seas, the East Blue. Unfortunately, I don't have anything smaller than this," Mihawk said, with a cocky grin. Zoro did not like this at all. "Quit mocking me. You'll regret it when you're dead." Zoro charged Mihawk with his blades ready. As he neared his foe, he prepared his attack. "Oh, Zoro and Ikki. No one can beat Zoro and Ikki," Johnny and Yosaku shouted from the sidelines. "Santoryu. Onigiri." Zoro's blades flashed forward, thirsty for blood. Zoro was in for a shock though when all three of his blades stopped cold against Mihawk's small knife. "What the hell? Our skill can't be this different." Zoro jumped back, creating some space, then charged back in hacking and slashing with all the speed and strength his training gave him. Mihawk swung the dagger at Zoro in a casual attack, throwing Zoro to the ground. Zoro got up, slightly winded from the short exchange. "I did not come all this way to be defeated by a toy," Zoro shouted as he increased the speed and intensity of his sword slashes. When he overreached to swing, Mihawk dodged, causing Zoro to trip. Mihawk gave him a swift chop to the back of the neck, attempting to end the duel. Flashback. Zoro and Kuino are dueling under the moonlight, the first duel where Zoro used real blades. As with most of his duels with Kuina, it was brutally short, with Zoro on his back and Kuina's sword at his throat. Kuina started crying because her father had told her that she could not be the best swordsman because she was a woman. Shortly after this duel, Kuina had passed away. Due to falling downstairs, her father allowed Zoro to carry her will in the form of Wado Ichimonji, her sword. One of the 21 high-grade swords. Flashback end. Zoro came back to reality and climbed back to his feet. Zoro prepared for an attack Santoryu. Torigari. But when he called it out, his observation Haki predicted that he would be stabbed in the chest. So he jumped back at the last second, gasping for breath. Mihawk raised an eyebrow at the move. "Why did you leap back at the last second? Were you scared of dying?" Mihawk asked. Zoro glared and shook his head. "No. I sensed you were going to stab me in the chest. Of course I would try to avoid that," Zoro responded. Mihawk flashed a sinister grin and flashed forward at speed. Zoro could not see, thrusting the blade into his chest, regardless of his Haki's warnings. "Well, it appears it happened anyway, doesn't it, swordsman? Why do you not back up? If this blade goes any deeper, then it will hit your heart and you will die." Zoro coughed some blood up before smiling. I don't know, I feel that if I back up even an inch all the promises, oaths, and deals I've made in my life would be meaningless. I would never be able to face you again if that were the case. Mihawk seemed curious. Even if it means death? He asked. Zoro nodded. Death would be better, Zoro said without an ounce of hesitation. Mihawk was shocked. Such strong will. Mihawk pulled the dagger back and jumped backwards away from Zoro. He sheathed his small dagger, putting it away. Kid, announce your name, Mihawk demanded. Zoro prepared his swords for his next attack but held fast. Urano is Zoro, he shouted. I'll remember it. It's been a while since I've seen such a strong will. As a reward I'll use my real sword, Mihawk said as he drew his black blade Yoru from its place on his back for the first time in this duel. I appreciate the gesture, Zoro said, then he charged forward, calling out his final attack of possibly the last fight of his life. Santoryu Ogi. Sanzen Sekai. As the two swordsmen clashed, they ended up on opposite sides of the wreckage that they started at. Zoro's unnamed swords both shattered from the clash. And blood sprayed from his wounded chest. I lost. I never even thought it would be possible. He sheathed Wado Ichimonji and turned to face his better with his arms spread wide. Mihawk was shocked by this gesture. What are you doing, Urano Zoro? He asked. Zoro grinned. The wound on the back is a swordsman's shame. And Mihawk charged forward to end the duel in one final slash when he was suddenly bombarded by an intense Conqueror's Haki. It was intense enough to cause him to weaken his swing and not cut too deeply into Zoro's chest. Zoro was still deeply wounded but was able to hold onto Wado Ichimonji and only fall to his knees. What was that? Who around here is strong enough to have such a powerful Haki? Mihawk looked around until he laid his eyes on a familiar straw hat. The man wearing it was glaring at him. Where did you get that straw hat, boy? Mihawk asked. Luffy placed his hand protectively on his hat. Shanks gave it to me when I told him that I would be Pirate King and have a crew stronger than his, Luffy answered. Mihawk nodded. I thought as much, I knew it was familiar. Mihawk shot back. Zoro, get back here and get bandaged up. Nami, I want to show you right now that you can trust me to protect you. You Mihawk, how about you and me have a little spar? Luffy shouted, leaking conquering Haki across the battlefield, knocking out many of the weaker pirates and chefs. What the hell is with this guy? Sanji asked, feeling lightheaded from the excess Haki Luffy was leaking out in anticipation of his fight. This man is a real pirate, someone who's seen hell and lived to tell the tale, Zeff said, barely affected by the level of Haki he was feeling. But he did have to wipe a few beads of sweat from his brow. Nami glued her eyes onto Luffy. This is the man that said he can beat Arlong the Saw and she wants to see proof. Please don't be a mistake, girl. Cocoyashi village can't afford a mistake, she thought desperately. Zoro sat up as they wrapped his chest, eyes glued on the men about to battle. You better not kill him, Luffy. He's mine to defeat, Zoro shouted in his head. Johnny and Yosaku were torn between treating Zoro and watching the battle. I'm being ignored, Krieg chanted in his mind like a mantra. Jin was just glad that he or his captain haven't been killed by Mihawk or this insane Straw Hat Kid yet. Luffy pulled out his scimitar from his waist sash. Luffy whispered Busashoku. Koka channeling armament Haki down the length of the blade. He grinned at Mihawk. This blade was given to me by your rival, Shanks. Besides Shanks, you'll be the first real challenge I've tested this word on yet, Luffy said. Swinging the sword back and forth a few times, limbering up. It looks like a fine sword, red hair wouldn't give you an inferior blade, Mihawk said as he readied Yoru. Luffy swung his sword arm out, causing his rubbery flesh to ripple. This in turn caused his skin to start smoking and turn a violent pink, looking like he was suffering a mean sunburn. This is my gear second. It enhances all my combat skills, power, speed, reaction time, all of it. Ready yourself. Luffy vanished in a blisteringly fast Zoro, appearing beside Mihawk mid-swing. Mihawk quickly brought Yoru up to block the blade. Their swords locked in a battle of strength. I don't really have any fancy moves like Zoro, you see I'm not a swordsman, but I can still do a few things that would make Zoro jealous. Luffy jumped back and swung his sword several times at Mihawk, firing off blades of wind from the edge, similar to a Rankyaku. Mihawk was forced to dodge and parry the wind blades, a few coming within inches of his clothes. Mihawk soared behind Luffy, used a horizontal slash at Luffy's waist. Luffy jumped, while in the air Mihawk tried to catch him where he should be unable to evade, but Luffy used Geppu to move to the opposite end of the wreckage. You fight well for someone who claims not to be a swordsman, Monkey D. Luffy, Mihawk said. Luffy laughed. Shishishi, well I did learn a few tricks from the best, right? Luffy flung his sword-wielding hand at Mihawk, surprising him slightly, forcing him to jump to the side. He was preparing to cut Straw Hat's hand off at the wrist when Luffy stabbed his sword into the ground, using it as an anchor, pulled himself forward to strike at Mihawk with his fist. The tactic was so out of left field that Mihawk actually had to block the fist with the flat side of his sword, still the force was enough to send Mihawk sliding back several yards. Mihawk sighed and turned to face Luffy who was standing shaking his fist in apparent pain after having punched a Haki-coated slab of steel. Mihawk raised his sword and brought it down in a heavy swing, sending a heavy blade of wind at Luffy. Luffy pumped more armament Haki into his blade and swung it in front of the blade of wind, fighting it with all his strength. Moments later he won, but not without earning a moderately painful slash to his shoulder. Grunting in pain. "You gotta be so rough, Hawkeye. I thought we were just friendly spar here," Luffy asked, grinning at the swordsman. Luffy put his sword away and started pumping more Haki to his arms and legs. "Gomu Gomu no pistol," Luffy shouted, sending his blackened fist flying at near supersonic speeds towards the Shichibukai. Hawkeye raised his sword to block. As he did, there was a large booming sound, and the air seemed to crack with the pressure as two conquerors of the sea clashed in glorious combat. As the battle progressed, the onlookers went through various stages of disbelief and panic. The people watching could feel the battle more than anything. When the clashes would happen, there would be large shocks that would shake the ships and seas. "I think I can trust this man to defeat Arlong for me. Who would have thought I would meet a regular person, a human that could kill that monster?" Nami thought as she held onto the railing of the Baratie for dear life. "This is the power of the Grand Line. Who would have thought I was really this far out of my league? He never even had to try with me. I'd feel bad if I didn't actually feel so damned excited," Zoro thought as he gained a vicious grin. Usopp was just drawing a blank. He had gone into mental overload a while back. Zeff looked over at the young chef, soon to be pirate. "You could do this too, little eggplant, someday. If your ambition and drive is great enough, this is what a man who is willing to give his all for his dream fights like," Zeff said as he put a reassuring hand on Sanji's shoulder. Sanji nodded hesitantly. "What kind of monsters are these? They can't really be human, can they? I can barely see them moving," Sanji thought as he rubbed his eyes. When the Gomu Gomu no pistol clashed with Mihawk's Yoru, the wave of Conqueror's Haki that was exuded from the fighters' clash washed over the Krieg pirates, including Don Krieg himself. This caused the rest of the enemy pirates, Krieg included, to pass out and lapse into a temporary coma. No one seemed to care. The clash of willpower dragged on for a moment longer as the wood they stood on buckled and cried under the strain. Shortly though it stopped and the two men jumped back, giving each other some space. Mihawk slowly put his sword back at its place on his back. "Impressive control over your willpower, boy. You will go far. I've had enough fun for one day. Shall I give your greetings to Red Hair?" Mihawk asked. The young man deserved that much at least. Luffy allowed his gear second to fade, as well as his Basashoku Haki. "Yeah, tell him I'll be entering paradise soon, and my promise still stands. I'll beat his crew and get to One Piece first," Luffy shouted with a face-splitting grin. Mihawk nodded and turned to Zoro and said, "No matter how long it will take, I will await you at my strongest. When you master your true self, when you find your true blades, when you surpass this sword, come find me in the new world. We will have a real fight and see who is truly the strongest swordsman in the world." Mihawk had his say and left. For Mihawk to say such words to a lowly swordsman of East Blue, these people are going to go far. "You chose well, eggplant," Zeff said, more to himself than anyone else. Sanji nodded, but then gained a tick mark. "You chose for me, old man," Sanji shouted, growing his sharp teeth and flaming eyes. Luffy and company were eating a feast on the Baratie's tab. Luffy had been bandaged up and Nami was doting over him, possibly ripping his sutured wounds open again. Luffy had eaten so much he was like a giant balloon. "Don't worry about it, Nami, I have cool technique for just these kinds of minor wounds," he said as he stood up and concentrated on the food he had gorged on. Causing his body to return to its normal slim look, smoke rose from his deep cut on his shoulder. Luffy reached up and yanked the bandage off, showing a minor scar where the wound used to be. "What the hell was that, Captain?" Zoro asked. While the rest had equally curious looks on their faces. "That was a technique I learned called Life Return. It allows me to use stored energy in my body to gain energy or force my body to heal minor wounds quickly. Comes in real handy after a hard day's training, let me tell you." Shushi, Luffy laughed. Until he was sent crashing to the ground courtesy of a Nami punch to the head. "Why didn't you tell us sooner, moron? And here I was worried about you," Nami shouted, her fist smoking from the impact. Later that day the crew was getting ready to depart after the ship had been stocked and Sanji had loaded his belongings on board. Sanji was making his way to the boat when he turned around and fell to his knees. Thank you for everything, old man Zeff. I promise I will make you proud. I'll become the best cook on all the 7 seas. People will come flocking here to hear all about me and the man who taught me." Sanji shouted, tears rolling down his face, splashing on the deck of the Baratie. Zeff nodded, wiping a tear or two from his eyes himself. Luffy shouted, "Let us go. To Konami Islands." causing everyone to cheer. Nami cracked a huge grin as she steered the boat out and towards her home island. Hours later everyone was relaxing on the deck of the Going Merry, everyone except Johnny and Yosaku that is. They were pacing back and forth. Obviously tense and nervous. Luffy was growing impatient with their antics. "What are you two clowns doing? You're gonna wear a trench in the deck," Luffy shouted. They turned to him. "But Luffy and Nikki. We are headed right into Arlong the Saw's territory going to Konami Islands," Johnny shouted. Yosaku agreed with a panicked nod. "Yeah, Luffy and Nikki, Arlong is an ex-member of a Shichibukai's crew. We heard he was kicked out of Jinbei's crew for being too dangerous," Yosaku shouted. Luffy scoffed. "If he were as strong as you are saying, then there's no way in hell he would have stuck around in East Blue of all places. My money's on him being a weak coward too afraid of the Grand Line to go there," Luffy stated as he put his feet up on the table. Only to get kicked in the head for his trouble by Sanji. "No feet on the table. Don't make me teach you table manners." Sanji glared at his captain. Luffy rubbed his head. "Oh man, I'm rubber, how do you guys hurt me so bad without Haki?" Luffy asked. Sanji gained an intrigued look. "Ah, that's right, I heard you talking about this Haki stuff, but I never got a full explanation, so spill it, Luffy," Sanji demanded. Several long minutes and a relatively thorough explanation of Haki and its effects later and Sanji found himself being Zoro's training dummy. The deck was filled with sounds of the blonde man's pain groans. Much to the swordsman's great pleasure. Nami and Usopp were training themselves as well. Usopp would shoot at her with weak lead shots while she was blindfolded. Luffy was training himself, using Geppu to fly high above the ship and fire Rankyaku blades into the distance, hoping to improve his stamina and strength. The rest of the day was spent in hard training. Around noon the next day, the Straw Hats were eating lunch in preparation for landing at Konami Island when a large disturbance in the water appeared off the side of the boat. Luffy could sense a large but weak sea king surfacing next to the boat. The beast, a spotted sea cow king, raised itself till it towered over the Going Merry like a man towers over a puppy. It leered at the food spread out on the table, drooling at the tasty-looking morsels. The humans probably didn't look so bad either. "What are we gonna do? It's gonna eat us." Johnny and Yosaku were shouting in full panic mode. Zoro and Sanji were preparing to attack the beast before it could sink the ship. When Luffy walked between them forcing them to make way. Both men stood down and watched. Luffy stood in front of the glaring cow. He raised his hand in the direction of the animal. It prepared to counterattack until it felt a wave of fear like nothing it had ever felt when facing the wrath of its current Fishman overlord. The beast felt a need to submit to this man like never before. It lowered its head until it was eye level with the small human. "You are so far from home seeking, are you under Arlong's control?" Luffy asked. The crew plus the bounty hunting friends were shocked when the Sea King nodded its head heatedly. Luffy placed his hand on the scared beast's head and patted it comfortingly. "You are free, sea cow, go back home to the Grand Line, this place isn't for you. Your old master won't be able to hurt you when I'm done with him," Luffy shouted. The Cow King shed tears of joy and actually licked Luffy before it fled East Blue. Luffy turned and seen everyone staring at him. "Luffy? That was Momo. Arlong's terrible monster. How did you do that?" Nami asked, genuinely shocked, more so than all the time since Luffy fought Mihawk. "That's just another part of Conqueror's Haki, the ability to overpower the will of others. With people it usually just leads to them passing out, but with animals it can be used to force them to submit to your superior will. That was literally nothing, Nami," Luffy said, smiling at her, causing her to blush slightly. A short time later the crew had hidden the Going Merry in a small hidden cove near a small village that Arlong had already destroyed for someone not being able to pay his ransom. Luffy was not pleased to say the least when he seen the village. The crew found themselves in front of a small house with a tangerine groove. Nami kicked the door open and walked in, followed by Luffy and the crew. "Nijiko? I'm home. Oh hello Genzo-san." Nami half shouted half stated calmly. Nijiko, a pretty young woman who had blue hair, black eyes, and a distracting tattoo across her chest that continued down her right arm. She was wearing a tight white shirt and blue pants. Genzo was an older man who wore an old policeman's uniform, his face though was littered with scars from what looked to be torture aimed intentionally to maim and disfigure. "Hello Nami-san. No treasure this time? Who are those people behind you?" Genzo asked, with Nijiko nodding showing her similar interests. Nami allowed a beautiful happy smile spread across her face. Raising her thumb and pointing at the scrawny guy in the straw hat. "This guy, he's gonna crush Arlong for me," she said, nearly dancing in joy at the mere thought of Arlong's coming defeat. Genzo and Nijiko seemed to panic at the statement. "What are you thinking, Nami? What about the plan? How can you possibly risk it all on this kid?" Genzo asked. Nijiko nodding in agreement with Genzo's statement. "Nami, we can't afford to risk everything like this. I mean that guy doesn't look any stronger than Genzo-san here." Nijiko said, grabbing her sister by the shoulders and shaking her. Nami lightly slapped her hands off her and gave her a light-hearted glare. I've seen this man fight on nearly even grounds with Hawkeye's Mihawk and knock people out simply by glaring at them. He's not weak. Nami said, annoyed that her sister and friend would question her new captain's strength. Oh, you're gonna make me blush, Nami. Luffy said, smiling with his closed. The two Cocoyashi residents looked at him closer but just couldn't see it. Arlong Park is a small compound that is on the edge of the island, complete with a pool that connects to the ocean and a large Japanese-style pagoda house. Arlong is a large, muscular, light blue saw shark fisherman whose most distinctive trait is his saw-shaped nose. He has long, black hair with a widow's peak reaching down to his shoulders under a brownish anka. He has a fin on his nape, surrounded by his hair, and the gills are located on both the sides of his neck. He also has a unique tattoo on his left pectoral shaped like a blazing sun. A marine captain named Nezumi, who looked like the love child of a woman and a rat, he actually has whiskers, approached Arlong to negotiate the monthly bribe that Arlong would pay him for not reporting his activities to his superiors. Nezumi, I've been informed that Nami-san has come home from another thieving adventure. She is too close now to her goal of 100 million berries. I want you to go to her house at the tangerine farm and take her money. I don't care the excuse you use, but make sure you get it. I get 80% of it, you get the rest. Kill anyone who tries to stop you, except little Nami, of course. If you harm a hair on her head, I'll kill you myself. Got it? Arlong said as he reclined on his beach chair. Nezumi nodded quickly and ordered his men to follow him. Back at Nijiko's house, the crew and associates were eating some tangerines and telling stories when Luffy felt a large group approaching the house. Zoro noticed the captain's sudden alertness. What's going on, Captain? You sensed something? Zoro asked. Luffy nodded in the affirmative. There is a group of 20 men approaching the house right now. They are weak though. Luffy said. Everyone was listening and looking out the windows. It's the Marines. What the hell do they want? Shouldn't they be dealing with Arlong? Sanji asked. Nijiko shook her head. No, that's Nezumi, Arlong's personal marine, he is totally in Arlong's pocket. Nijiko shouted in rage. Luffy raised his hand in a calming gesture. I'll deal with this, Nijiko, besides you want to see what they were talking about earlier, right? Luffy stated as he walked to the door, opening it and seeing a group of Marines walking up to the house. What can we do for you Marines? Luffy asked, keeping his tone even. Nezumi walked forward and cleared his throat. Yes, I have heard that the cat bugler Nami lives in this residence. We have reason to believe she has stolen a sizable amount of treasure that belongs to citizens of the world government. It's my duty to make sure it all gets returned. Nezumi said with palpable arrogance. Nami and Nijiko growled with rage. Genzo was angry at the hypocrisy of it all. Luffy glared at the man. Why aren't you dealing with Arlong and not wasting your time on a small-time thief that only steals from pirates marine? Luffy asked, attempting to keep himself under control. One of the things he hated most in this world was corruption. At least pirates are honest with themselves and those around them. Real pirates at least. What we do and how we do it is of no concern of a civilian. Step aside and let us search the premises for contraband. Men tear this place apart. Nezumi shouted. Luffy had heard enough and sent a moderately powerful blast of Conqueror's Haki at the Marines behind Nezumi, but avoiding Nezumi completely. Earning shocked gasps from both Nijiko and Genzo. When Nezumi heard no shouts in the affirmative, he turned and his complexion became ghost white. What happened to my men? Nezumi shouted in panic. Luffy grabbed the gun from Nezumi's holster as he told the man what he did. Then he threw the man to the ground in front of Nami, Nijiko, and Genzo. Why don't you guys let this Marine know how you feel about his performance as a Marine? Luffy suggested. Nezumi turned and looked at the three and whimpered in fear as they all cracked their knuckles and prepared their personal weapons. Several minutes later and a severely beaten Nezumi later. That was simply amazing, Luffy-san. Nijiko said as she walked up to Luffy. Luffy smiled at the compliment. Thanks Nijiko, but it's nothing at all really. Luffy said. Nami walked up to them and patted her sister on her shoulder. He's right, sis. I've seen him do a lot more and you will too soon. Nami said ecstatically. Well, I guess it's time to get this show on the road then, you guys ready? Luffy asked everyone as he grabbed Nezumi and started dragging him off to Arlong Park. At Arlong Park? Where the hell is that rat? It's been plenty of time, he should have found the gold and get back here. If I find out he stole it all for himself, I'll kill him slowly. Shouted an aggravated and impatient Arlong. One of Arlong's elites, Kuroobi. A Ray Fishman approached Arlong. Arlong-san, perhaps Nami has betrayed us and attacked Nezumi-san. It was reported that she had several people with her, was it not? Kuroobi suggested. Arlong scoffed. Why would she betray us when she is apparently so close? She can't need more than 1 or 2 more trips to have all the money, Arlong reasoned. Kuroobi shrugged. He never trusted Nami from the start anyways. Moments later there was a large explosion as the gate of Arlong Park was destroyed. When the smoke cleared they seen a group of teens with Nami leading them. They were also followed by what seemed to be every villager from Cocoyashi village. Arlong sighed and glared at Kuroobi, who simply smirked at him. "Yes, you were right, Kuroobi, I will have to show Nami-san the error of her ways now," Arlong said. Luffy stepped forward. "Which one of you fish bastards is Arlong?" Luffy shouted. Arlong glared at the young man. "I'm Arlong, what do you want, human?" Arlong answered and asked. Luffy threw Nezumi at Arlong's feet. "I want you to keep your trash out of Nami and Najiko's garden," Luffy said angrily. Arlong looked at the bloody and black and blue human laying at his feet. "Am I supposed to be scared by the sight of my useless subordinate marine being beaten up? I could have done this without even getting up from my chair," Arlong said. Luffy answered with a solid punch to Arlong's cheek, launching him across Arlong Park into the brick retainer wall, then straight through it, where he proceeded to cut a swath through the hills outside Arlong Park. All the fishmen were shocked and angered by the unprovoked attack. Luffy blasted all the fodder fishmen into blissful unconsciousness so that his men could fight the fishmen without interference. Ju, Kuroobi, and Hatchan were all speechless at the unfortunate turn of events. Arlong has not returned yet and all the backup was gone. Kuroobi turned to Hatchan. "Hachi, call Momo. We need to take care of these guys quickly," he shouted. Hachi nodded and ran to the pool and blew into a trumpet. Luffy snickered at what he heard. The villagers were curious as to the reason but did not ask. Some time passed as Arlong returned to the battlefield. "What the hell did that kid do? I feel like he gave me a concussion," Arlong thought as he gently shook his head. "Hachi, what are you doing? Where is Momo?" Chu asked. Arlong shook his head in the negative. "I don't know, Chu, he seems to not be around," Hatchan asked. Luffy stepped forward. "I can answer that question. He tried to attack us before we landed on this island. So I tamed him and then sent him back to the Grand Line where he belongs. It was really easy," Luffy said. "Zoro, why don't you take the octopus guy, Sanji you take the guy in the guy, and Usopp you take the thin-lipped guy," Luffy commanded. Everyone nodded in acceptance, even Usopp. Asked Johnny and Yosaku to borrow their swords, they willingly handed them to him, then he jumped into the fray to attack Hachi. Sanji flew at Kuroobi with an extended foot. Usopp shot Chu in the face, then bolted out of the park. Zoro and Hachi were facing off against each other when Hachi suddenly attempted to spit black ink on Zoro. Zero visibility. Octopus Hachi black. Zoro dodged it completely. "Why are you trying to spit on me? Can't I get a real swordsman once in a while? Not one that cheats and uses tricks?" Zoro asked. Hatchan looked surprised. "You want a fair fight, then let me get my swords," Hachi said. Zoro nodded. "At your weapons, I will not attack an unarmed man or octopus," Zoro said. Hachi jumped up the side of the building and climbed into a window, coming out shortly with 6 swords. "You ready to do this, octopus?" Zoro asked. Hatchan nodded. "You'll never beat me, human. Each of my 6 swords weighs more than 650 pounds. How can you possibly fight that kind of power?" Hatchan asked, hoping to intimidate the human. Hatchan did not harbor the same deep-seated hatred for humans that the others in his crew did, so he would avoid having to kill a human if he could. "The weight on my sword is far heavier than all of those swords combined. You would never understand what rests on this blade," Zoro said as he placed his hand on the handle of Wado Ichimonji. Hatchan shook his head and charged at Zoro. "It doesn't matter. I can't just let you guys get away with attacking us," Hatchan shouted as he swung all 6 blades at Zoro. Zoro however blocked the blades easily. "Santoryu. Sword wolf floating," Zoro shouted as he forced his body to spin at high speeds, causing a localized whirlwind and throwing Hatchan back several yards and some minor lacerations across his chest and arms. "Nice attack, human. What's your name?" Hatchan asked. It has been a while since he had a good fight. "Barano Zoro is my name, remember it, octopus," Zoro answered. Hatchan growled. "If I am to call you Zoro, then you should at least call me by my name, Hatchan," shouted. Octopus foot miracle swords. Hatchan lunged at Zoro, swinging his swords wildly as Zoro weaved in and out of them with apparent ease. "You're gonna have to do better than this, Hatchan. If you can't you won't even be able to kill my boredom," Zoro said. Hatchan charged at Zoro and readied another attack. Octopus pot stance. Hatchan pointed all his blades directly at Zoro, thrusting them forward again. Zoro was able to block the attack and return his own in kind. Santoyu. Demon slash. Zoro shot forward, scoring a large cut on Hachi's body, throwing him into the pool. Zoro sheathed his blades and returned the unnamed ones to Johnny and Yosaku while taking a position against the wall to watch the rest of the fights play out. Sanji and Kuroobi were glaring at each other. "Why are you humans helping that witch? Nami lives on betrayal. She plans on betraying you as we fight here, I bet," Kuroobi said. But that was the wrong thing to say as Sanji was livid at his disrespect towards the woman of his dreams. "How dare you insult Nami Swan like that?" Sanji shouted as he blitzed towards Kuroobi at speeds that surprised a fishman. Shoulder shot. Sanji attempted a overhead kick to the fishman's shoulder and was blocked. "I'm a level 40 master of fishman karate. There is no way a lowly human like yourself could beat me," Kuroobi shouted, looking down on the human as he does most of the human species. "You know, I wonder how you guys would taste if I sauteed you with a fine wine for flavor?" Sanji asked, genuinely curious. Kuroobi did not like the idea of being sauteed. 100-tile true punch launching a hard straight punch at Sanji hitting straight in the chest, sending him flying into the wall cracking it. "Ahaha, that just goes to show you how weak humans really are. One hit and you are down like that." But something seemed off to Kuroobi. The blonde human was actually lighting a cigarette seemingly unconcerned about his current predicament. "You're a level 40 master? Then my teacher must have been a level 400 master. That punch was weak," Sanji shouted, then quickly launched into a handstand and performed a spinning kick, Codelet. The kick was far too quick and close for Kuroobi to dodge, and he took it point blank and at full strength to the ribs, sending him flying across the park. That hurt," Kuroobi mumbled to himself as he climbed hack to his feet, spitting some blood. "I better take this human seriously. He seems strong enough to be a threat. I wonder how strong that one in the straw hat is if he isn't end fighting after punching Arlong-san yet," Kuroobi thought. "I'm gonna give you a strong attack right now human, see how you like it." Kuroobi seemed to take a wide stance and seemed to be concentrating on his fists as he prepared his attack. Sanji seeing the type of attack it will be before Kuroobi even launches it charges forward. Kuroobi grins as he readies the attack. 1000-tile true punch. Sanji anticipated the attack because of the preparation he witnessed and he jumped into the extended arm, then flew into the air higher, spinning adding momentum to his next attack. Sheep shot. Sanji came down and laid a heavy boot into Kuroobi's back muscle, causing the fishman to cry out in agony as he flew into the retaining wall just like his captain earlier. Usopp was running for his life from an angry half-blind fishman. He had gotten a few lucky shots with his Tabasco star, getting the hot sauce into the eyes of Chu. Chu was firing random balls of water at Usopp as he kept a wide gap between himself and Chu. Just how far can this human run? Chu thought as he fired a few more blasts of water. "I have to keep track of my water usage or I will run out," Chu thought. "Come here little human, let me end this for you nice and quick," Chu shouted at Usopp. "No thanks. I like living just fine," Usopp returned as he turned off the main road into the woods. Chu continued to fire balls of water into the woods, ripping pieces of the trees off as he did so, but never hitting his intended target. Usopp, showing his superior sniping skills, would pop out from time to time, a new hiding spot each time, and fire a different attack. Kyakubashi shouted and fired a small explosive projectile at Chu, hitting him square in the face. The fishman cursed his bad luck. Usopp ran back towards the road making sure to make noise as he laid out some cal traps behind him. When he heard the fishman cry out in pain he quickly shot another Tabasco star directly into his eyes, further ruining Chu's vision followed by 2 gunpowder star. Chu moaned in pain and impotent anger. He could barely see at this point. Usopp hammer was the last thing he heard before he fell to blissful unconsciousness as Usopp began to smack him in the head repeatedly with a small hammer he had kept for ship repairs. Usopp panted and looked down at his defeated foe, feeling a sense of accomplishment he had never felt before. He ran back to Arlong Park cheering the name of Captain Usopp to anyone that could hear. Luffy stepped towards Arlong. Arlong glared at him. "Well Arlong, it looks like it's finally your turn. All of your generals are done. Some worse than others." Shishishi. Luffy chucked at the fishman's misfortune. "You think you can beat me human? That punch earlier wasn't bad. I'll give you that, but you aren't in my league human. You know why fishmen are superior don't you?" Arlong asked and waited for a response. "Honestly I don't care what makes you think you are superior to me, the facts are this. You are going to get your ass kicked and there isn't a thing you can do about it. So what you need to do is put up or shut up," Luffy said, throwing Arlong off his normal game. Arlong recovered quickly and came at Luffy with a strong right punch which Luffy deftly dodged. He grabbed hold of Arlong's arm and then sent a strong punch into Arlong's abdomen, causing the man to suck wind. Luffy let go of his head and waited for the man to get his breath back. "How the hell is he doing this? I mean he's seriously toying with Arlong," one of the villagers asked. This was quickly seconded and thirded and so on by the other villagers. "The captain is too strong for Arlong, that's how. This fight is going to be boring," Zoro said as he sat down to take a nap. The villagers were shocked at his apathy and lack of concern for his apparent captain. "You guys need to relax. This is Monkey D. Luffy, the future pirate king we are watching fight. Enjoy the show, watch him humiliate Arlong." "Luffy." Nami cheered Luffy on loudly. The villagers started following suit with Nami. Usopp got back and was shocked to see the villagers all chanting Luffy's name. What's this about Zoro? Waiting for a response, he looks down and finds Zoro sleeping. Lazy bastard. Usopp raged in his head. He turned to see Luffy schooling Arlong. Luffy was weaving in and out of Arlong's teeth fist attacks. Then Arlong throw an attack and Luffy grabbed his arm, laughing a heavy knee blow to Arlong's core. I don't even have to use my devil fruit on you at this point, Arlong. It would be overkill. Luffy said, antagonizing the man further. Arlong was not a man that liked to be toyed with. Arlong flung water from his hand in the form of bullets at Luffy, but again Luffy simply dodged every projectile. What kind of human are you? I've never seen anyone in the blues nearly as strong as you. It almost feels like I'm fighting Jinbei or something. Arlong shouted. He was getting frustrated. He turned and ran into the main building of Arlong Park, grabbing his sword Kuroobi. Now what are you going to do, human? Think that weak little sword on your waist can stand up against Kuroobi? No way it will. Arlong shouted. Why should I draw my sword for someone like you? My sword wasn't given to me to swat flies, Luffy said, keeping a stoic attitude, hoping to enrage the fishmen further. Arlong roared and swung the Kuroobi at Luffy, who simply whispered Basashoku Haki, coating his arm in back armor, and blocked the sword with his forearm, causing it to shatter against Luffy's willpower. Arlong stared at the handle of his X-sword for a moment before something in his mind snapped. His eyes became red and dilated. Arlong charged at Luffy with new speed and ferocity. This isn't going to cut it. Just getting mad won't be enough, Arlong. Luffy shouted as he bent and weaved through attacks like a piece of paper swing in the breeze. When the moment felt right, he reached out and grabbed Arlong's arm and slammed him into the pavement hard enough to bury his head in the concrete. When Luffy let go, Arlong kicked him in the chest, sending him flying back a few yards, but otherwise causing no harm. Arlong then jumped into the pool. He wanted to get to the water and try something else. Well, that's okay, there is nothing he has to penetrate my Basashoku. Haki. Luffy watches as Arlong swam under the water, getting distance to gain speed. Arlong and started speeding towards Luffy, who was standing near the edge of the water. Shark on darts, Luffy heard as Arlong's nose breached the surface of the ocean and came flying at Luffy with great speed. Stepped aside as Arlong was about to pass by him and smashed his fist into the back of Arlong's head, sinking all of Arlong into a crater in the concrete. When Arlong did not get back up, Luffy turned his attention to Arlong Park's main building. Luffy put his thumb into his mouth, bit down and blew air into his bones. His arm quickly increased in size to the point that it looked like the limb of a giant. Gear 3rd. Luffy then jumped high into the air, maintaining the height with Geppu. He threw his fist backwards and called out the attack, Gomu Gomu no Gigan Pistol. Sending the attack down and through the main structure of Arlong Park, turning it into nothing more than a pile of rubble. Luffy allowed the air to deflate from his body. So Nami? Are we Nakama now? You going to map the world with us? Luffy asked, giving her a huge smile that split his face from ear to ear. Nami ran to him and engulfed him in a huge hug. I knew you would do it. I just knew it. She shouted as she pressed her face into his neck and shed tears of joy to the sound of cheering villagers behind them. That is the end, so thanks for watching. Comment down below with recommendations on what fanfic I should do next. And remember to like and subscribe to my channel.